The dust-laden wind carried a secret as it swept through the desolate plains of Wyoming Territory in 1876, a secret of broken hearts finding each other amidst the untamed wilderness of the American frontier. Tallulah Thompson stared at the smoldering remains of her family's homestead, the acrid smell of ash and burnt wood still hanging in the air 3 days after the raiders had come. She knelt in the dirt, her calloused fingers sifting through the blackened debris that had once been her home. Everything was gone: her parents' letters, her mother's china, the handcrafted rocking chair her father had built for her mother when they first arrived from Boston 5 years ago. All turned to ash, just like her parents, who now rested beneath 2 crude wooden crosses on the hill, overlooking what remained of their dreams. Tallulah's dark hair whipped around her face as another gust of wind blew through, but she barely noticed. At 22, she had expected to be married by now, perhaps starting a family of her own. Instead, she was alone, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the few items she'd managed to salvage from the ruins. "Miss, you should not be out here alone." The deep voice startled her. Tallulah spun around, reaching instinctively for the small revolver tucked in her skirt pocket, the one her father had insisted she learn to use when they moved west. A tall man sat atop a chestnut stallion, his face partially obscured by the shadow cast by his wide-brimmed hat. His duster coat was coated in trail dust, and a Winchester rifle rested across his saddle. "This is my land," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Who's asking?" The stranger dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. "Name's Tucker Stone. I track for the sheriff's office in Wheatland." Tallulah kept her hand on her revolver. "Did Sheriff Dawson send you?" Tucker Stone nodded, removing his hat to reveal sun-weathered features and eyes the color of a summer sky. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, the mark of a hard life in an unforgiving land. "He did. Word reached town about what happened here." His eyes moved to the fresh graves on the hill, then back to Tallulah. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Thompson, Tallulah Thompson." She finally released her grip on the revolver. "And your sympathy won't bring them back, Mr. Stone." "No, it won't." He agreed with a frankness that she found oddly comforting. Most people offered hollow platitudes, but Tucker Stone spoke the truth plainly. "But justice might give you some peace." Tallulah laughed bitterly. "Justice? Out here? The law doesn't reach this far, Mr. Stone. That's what my father found out the hard way." Tucker's expression hardened. "The men who did this, do you know them?" Tallulah turned away, looking again at the ruins. "Jasper Reeves and his gang. They've been pressuring my father to sell our land for months. The railroad's coming through, and Reeves wants to control all the property along the proposed route." Tucker stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly. "Miss Thompson, you can't stay here. It's not safe." "I have nowhere else to go. Come back to Wheatland. Sheriff Dawson can offer protection while we track down Reeves and his men." Tallulah squared her shoulders. "I'm not leaving my land. If I go, Reeves wins. This is all I have left." Tucker's gaze swept the horizon. "Night's coming. At least let me help you set up a proper camp. We can discuss your options in the morning." Tallulah wanted to refuse, to send this stranger on his way, but exhaustion had settled into her bones over the past 3 days. She nodded reluctantly. As the sun set, Tucker built a small fire and set up a makeshift shelter using a canvas tarp from his saddlebags. He produced some jerky, hardtack, and coffee, sharing his meager rations with Tallulah. "How long have you worked for Sheriff Dawson?" she asked as they sat by the fire. Tucker poured her a cup of coffee. 3 years. Before that, I rode with a cattle outfit in Montana Territory. And before that," his expression grew distant, "war, Confederate cavalry, but that's a lifetime ago now." Tallulah studied him across the flames. The firelight softened the harsh lines of his face, making him look younger somehow. "Is that where you got that scar?" Tucker's hand instinctively went to his face. "No, that came later, a disagreement with a man who thought I cheated at cards. Did you?" For the first time, Tucker smiled, a brief, almost shy expression that transformed his face. "No, Miss Thompson, I did not. But in this country, the truth doesn't always matter as much as who draws faster." The night grew colder, and Tallulah wrapped herself in a blanket Tucker had provided. As the fire died down, she found herself telling him about her parents, about their dreams of building a prosperous farm, about her mother's garden that had finally started to flourish this year. "They didn't deserve to die like that," she whispered, staring into the embers. "Burned alive in their own home." Tucker's jaw tightened. "No one deserves that, Miss Thompson. I should have been here." The guilt she'd been carrying spilled out. "I was in town buying supplies. If I'd been here, you'd be dead too," Tucker interrupted gently. "And that wouldn't have helped anyone." Tears welled in her eyes. "At least we'd have died together. Now I'm alone, completely alone." Tucker didn't offer false reassurances. Instead, he added wood to the fire, building it back up. "Get some rest, Miss Thompson. Tomorrow will be another hard day." Tallulah retreated to the shelter he'd built, but sleep eluded her. Through the opening, she could see Tucker standing guard, his silhouette still against the star-filled sky, and somehow his presence made her feel safer than she had in days. Morning arrived with a brilliant sunrise that painted the prairie gold. Tallulah emerged from the shelter to find Tucker already awake, brewing fresh coffee. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "You want to stay on your land, and I respect that, but this homestead isn't safe anymore. Is there somewhere else you could set up temporarily? A line shack or hunting cabin your father might have built?" Tallulah considered his question. "There's an old trapper's cabin by the creek, about a mile east. Father fixed it up last winter when he needed to check on the cattle during the blizzard." Tucker nodded. "That might work. We'll move there today, make it defensible." Tallulah raised an eyebrow. "I'm not leaving you out here alone, Miss Thompson, not with Reeves and his men still at large." A protest formed on her lips, but she swallowed it. The truth was, she didn't want to be alone. "Very well, Mr. Stone, but I can't pay you for your protection. I'm not asking for payment." Tucker handed her a cup of coffee. "Sheriff Dawson sent me to investigate what happened and bring Reeves to justice. Keeping you safe is part of that duty." They spent the morning gathering what could be salvaged from the homestead. Tallulah's throat tightened when she found her mother's silver locket buried under a beam, blackened but intact. She slipped it around her neck, the metal cool against her skin. By midday, they had loaded Tucker's horse with their supplies and begun the walk to the trapper's cabin. Tallulah led the way, the familiar path offering small comfort. The creek gurgled softly as they approached the cabin, a simple one-room structure built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney. "It's not much," Tallulah said as they reached the clearing where the cabin stood, "but it's solid." Tucker assessed the structure with a critical eye. "Good sightlines, water nearby. We can make this work." The interior was dusty but otherwise untouched. A small cast iron stove stood in one corner, a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs in another, and a narrow cot against the far wall. Tucker immediately set to work securing the perimeter while Tallulah cleaned the cabin. As dusk approached, Tucker returned with 2 rabbits he'd trapped. "Hope you don't mind rabbit stew," he said, setting about skinning them with practiced ease. "I can cook," Tallulah offered, reaching for the rabbits. Tucker shook his head. "You've done enough today. Rest. I learned my way around a cookpot during the war." Tallulah watched him work, his movements economical and precise. "You're not what I expected from a tracker, Mr. Stone." "And what did you expect?" he asked, glancing up from his task. "Someone rougher, less." She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Considerate." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Don't mistake my manners for weakness, Miss Thompson. I've done things I'm not proud of to survive in this country." "Haven't we all?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. The rabbit stew turned out surprisingly good, seasoned with wild herbs Tucker had gathered. As they ate by the light of a single lantern, Tallulah found herself studying her unexpected protector. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Stone. What brought you to Wyoming Territory?" Tucker considered her question while chewing thoughtfully. "A fresh start, I suppose." After the war, I drifted for a while. Tried my hand at ranching in Texas, prospecting in Colorado. Nothing stuck until I came here. And what makes Wyoming different? The vastness of it, he replied, gesturing toward the door and the endless prairie beyond. A man can breathe out here. Can find himself or lose himself if that's what he's looking for. Which were you looking for? Tallulah asked softly. Tucker's blue eyes met hers across the table. Both, at different times. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of horses approaching. Tucker was on his feet in an instant, dousing the lantern and moving to the window. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice a harsh whisper as he reached for his Winchester. Tallulah's heart hammered against her ribs as she crouched beside the table, drawing her revolver. Through the darkness, she could hear the steady rhythm of hoofbeats growing louder. Tucker peered through a crack in the shutters. 4 riders, moving slow like they're searching for something or someone, Tallulah whispered. "Get under the bed," Tucker instructed. "If anything happens to me, there's a loose floorboard beneath it. Crawl into the space and stay quiet." Tallulah shook her head. "I'm not hiding while you face them alone. This isn't a debate, Miss Thompson." The hardness in his voice brooked no argument. "You wanted to stay on your land, and I respect that, but you'll do it by staying alive." Reluctantly, Tallulah slid under the narrow cot, pressing herself against the dirt floor. The cool earth smelled of dampness and decay, but she hardly noticed as she strained to hear what was happening. The riders had stopped outside. A voice called out, "Hello, the cabin. Anyone home?" Tucker remained silent, positioned by the window with his rifle ready. "We know someone's in there," the voice continued. "Saw the smoke from your chimney earlier. Just want to talk is all." "Talk about what?" Tucker finally responded, his voice carrying through the closed door. "Looking for a girl, Tallulah Thompson. Her folks had a place a few miles west. Terrible tragedy. What happened there?" Tallulah's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice, Jasper Reeves. "Don't know any Thompsons," Tucker called back. "I'm just a trapper passing through. Now ride on before I mistake you for claim jumpers." There was a moment of silence, then a low laugh. "Well now, that's right unfriendly. Maybe we should come in and warm ourselves by your fire, make proper introductions." 4 against 1 isn't great odds," Tucker replied calmly, "but I like my chances well enough. First man through that door won't live to regret it." Another voice joined the conversation. "Listen, mister, we don't want trouble. Just tell us if you've seen the girl. Dark hair, green eyes, about 20 years old." "Haven't seen anyone in days," Tucker insisted. "Now move along before this gets ugly." The tension hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Reeves spoke again. "All right, trapper, we'll be on our way, but keep an eye out for that girl. There's a reward for information on her whereabouts." "I'll bear that in mind," Tucker answered, his voice betraying nothing. The sound of hoofbeats gradually faded into the distance, but Tucker maintained his vigilant position by the window. After what seemed like hours, he finally moved away. "They're gone," he said, lighting the lantern again, "but they'll be back. Reeves isn't a man who gives up easily." Tallulah crawled out from under the bed, dust clinging to her skirts. "Thank you," she whispered, her hands trembling slightly. Tucker set his rifle aside and ran a hand through his hair. "Don't thank me yet. They know you're around here somewhere. They'll keep searching." "What do we do?" Tucker's expression was grim. "We can't stay here. They'll check every cabin and shack in the area. We need to get you somewhere safer, maybe all the way to Cheyenne where the territorial governor can offer protection." Tallulah shook her head vehemently. "No, I told you if I leave, Reeves wins." "I won't abandon my parents' land." "Your parents would want you to live, Miss Thompson," Tucker said gently, "and I want justice." Tallulah's voice broke. "They murdered my family, Mr. Stone, burned them alive in their own home, and for what? A piece of land for a railroad that may never come." Tucker's expression softened. "I understand wanting justice, but getting yourself killed won't bring your parents back." "Then help me," she pleaded, stepping closer to him. "Help me prove Reeves was behind the attack. Help me bring him to justice legally." Tucker studied her face for a long moment. "That's dangerous work, Miss Thompson, the kind that could get us both killed." I have nothing left to lose, she said softly. That's not true, Tucker countered. You have your life, your future. Tallulah laughed bitterly. What future? I'm alone in the world, Mr. Stone. My home is ashes, my family is dead. What exactly am I supposed to live for? The rawness of her pain hung in the air between them. Tucker's blue eyes held hers, and in them, Tallulah saw the understanding of someone who had also known profound loss. Sometimes, he said quietly, living well is the best revenge. They spent a restless night, taking turns keeping watch. When morning came, Tucker announced his plan. We'll head to Wheatland, but not along the main trail. I know a route through the foothills that Reeves and his men are unlikely to use. Once we reach town, we'll speak with Sheriff Dawson about building a case against Reeves. Tallulah nodded, resigned to the necessity of leaving, at least temporarily. They packed their meager supplies, and Tucker retrieved his horse from where he'd hidden it in a thicket of cottonwoods. You'll ride, he told her. I'll walk alongside. We can both ride, Tallulah suggested. I'm not heavy. Tucker shook his head. The horse will tire faster carrying two. We need to conserve his strength in case we need to make a quick escape. They set out as the sun climbed higher in the sky, following a narrow deer trail that wound through scrubby underbrush and stands of aspen trees. Tucker led the horse, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, alert for any sign of pursuit. By midday, the heat had become oppressive. They stopped in a shaded grove beside a small spring to rest and water the horse. How much farther to Wheatland? Tallulah asked, accepting the canteen Tucker offered. At this pace, we'll reach town by tomorrow afternoon, he replied, keeping his voice low despite the solitude of their location. Tallulah took a sip of water, then handed the canteen back. Tell me something, Mr. Stone. Why did you really come looking for me? Sheriff Dawson could have sent any deputy. Tucker avoided her gaze, busying himself with checking his horse's hooves. Sheriff thought I was the best tracker for the job. There's more to it than that, Tallulah pressed. I can tell when someone's not sharing the whole truth, Mr. Stone. Tucker straightened, finally meeting her eyes. Your father saved my life once, he admitted. 2 years ago, I was ambushed by cattle rustlers while tracking them through your family's land. Your father found me half dead from a bullet wound. He and your mother nursed me back to health. Tallulah stared at him in shock. I was visiting my aunt in Denver then. They never told me about this. Your father was a modest man. He didn't consider it anything special, just what any decent person would do. Tucker's expression grew somber. When I heard about what happened to them, I asked Sheriff Dawson to let me handle the investigation. I owed your father that much. So this is about repaying a debt, Tallulah said, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. Tucker shook his head. It started that way, but it's become more than that. Before he could elaborate, the crack of a rifle shot echoed through the trees. Tucker lunged forward, tackling Tallulah to the ground as a bullet splintered the trunk where she'd been standing moments before. Stay down, he hissed, drawing his revolver as he rolled behind a fallen log for cover. More shots rang out, the bullets thudding into the earth around them. Tallulah's heart pounded in her ears as she crawled toward the relative safety of a large boulder. How many? She whispered to Tucker, who was scanning the ridgeline above them. At least 2, maybe 3, he replied grimly. They've got the high ground. Nowhere to run, Miss Thompson. Jasper Reeves's voice called from the rocks above. Make this easy on yourself and come out now. Tucker's jaw tightened. When I start shooting, get to the horse and ride west as fast as you can. There's a ravine about half a mile from here where you can take cover. I'm not leaving you, Tallulah insisted. This isn't a discussion, Tucker growled. Those men want you dead, and I'm not letting that happen. Before Tallulah could protest further, Tucker fired 3 rapid shots toward the ridgeline, forcing their attackers to duck for cover. Go. He shouted, continuing to provide covering fire as Tallulah sprinted to the horse. She swung herself into the saddle and urged the stallion forward, but as she glanced back, she saw Tucker fall to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. Without hesitation, Tallulah wheeled the horse around and galloped back toward him, bullets kicking up dust around her. Reaching Tucker, she extended her hand. "Get on," she shouted. Tucker looked up at her in disbelief. "What are you doing? I told you to ride." "And I'm not leaving you behind," she retorted, grabbing his uninjured arm and helping him swing up behind her. "Hold on." Tucker wrapped his good arm around her waist as she spurred the horse into a gallop. They thundered through the trees, branches whipping past them as bullets continued to fly. Tallulah leaned low over the horse's neck, urging it to greater speed. The ravine Tucker had mentioned came into view, a deep cut in the earth with steep sides and a rocky bottom. Tallulah guided the horse down a narrow game trail, the animal picking its way carefully despite their desperate pace. Once in the ravine, they followed its winding course, the high walls offering protection from both bullets and sight. After a mile of hard riding, Tallulah finally slowed the exhausted horse to a walk. "We need to tend to that wound," she said over her shoulder. Tucker's breathing was ragged against her neck. "Keep moving, they'll be following our tracks." "You'll bleed to death if we don't stop," Tallulah argued. "There's a cave up ahead. I used to play there as a child when my father would bring me hunting. We can hide there while I bandage you up." The cave was little more than a shallow depression in the ravine wall, hidden behind a curtain of vines and scrub brush, but it offered temporary shelter. Tallulah helped Tucker dismount, alarmed by how heavily he leaned on her. Inside the cave, she eased him down against the wall and examined his wound. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, leaving an ugly but clean wound. "You're lucky," she murmured, tearing strips from her petticoat to use as bandages. "A few inches to the right and it would have hit something vital." Tucker managed a weak smile. Always did have more luck than sense. Tallulah cleaned the wound as best she could with water from their canteen, then bound it tightly with the makeshift bandages. Tucker watched her work, his face pale but composed. "Why did you come back for me?" he asked quietly. Tallulah's hand stilled for a moment. "You risked your life to protect me. I couldn't just leave you there to die." "It was foolish," Tucker said, though there was no anger in his voice. "Brave, but foolish." "Perhaps we're both fools then," she replied, securing the last of the bandages. Night was falling and the temperature dropped rapidly. Tallulah built a small fire deep in the cave where its light wouldn't be visible from outside, then wrapped her shawl around Tucker, who had begun to shiver. "We should rest here tonight," she decided. "You're in no condition to travel and the horse needs recovery time as well." Tucker didn't argue, a sign of how weakened he truly was. Tallulah settled beside him, drawing comfort from his presence despite their dire circumstances. "You think they'll find us?" she asked softly. Tucker's good arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer to share his warmth. "The ravine will fill with water if it rains. It'll wash away our tracks, and Reeves doesn't know this area like you do." Tallulah rested her head against his uninjured shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up to her. "When did my life become this?" she whispered. "Running and hiding, fearing for my life. It won't always be like this," Tucker promised. "We'll get to Wheatland, build a case against Reeves. There's still a chance for justice and for a future." "What kind of future could I possibly have now?" Tallulah asked, her voice breaking. "I'm too broken to love, too damaged to build a life with anyone. Who would want someone carrying so much grief and pain?" Tucker's hand gently tilted her face up to his. In the flickering firelight, his blue eyes were intense. "Broken things heal stronger, Tallulah. The Japanese have an art form called kintsugi. They repair broken pottery with gold, making the cracks part of the beauty instead of something to hide." "Is that what happened to you?" she asked softly. "Did you heal stronger after the war?" A shadow crossed his face. "I'm still healing." "But yes, in some ways the breaking made me who I am now, made me understand what matters." "And what matters?" Tucker Stone, his eyes held her steadily. "Honor, truth, protecting those who can't protect themselves." He paused, then added more quietly, "and finding someone worth fighting for." The intimacy of the moment hung between them, fragile and new. Tallulah felt something stir within her, an emotion she hadn't expected to feel again after the devastation of the past week. "We should try to get some sleep," Tucker finally said, breaking the spell. "Tomorrow will be challenging." Tallulah nodded, though she remained close to his side, drawing comfort from his presence as she drifted into an uneasy sleep. Morning arrived with a steady downpour, just as Tucker had hoped. The rain would wash away their tracks and make pursuit difficult. Tallulah checked his wound and was relieved to find no signs of infection, though Tucker winced when he tried to move his arm. "We'll have to alter our course," he said as they prepared to leave. "Head straight south to intercept the stage road. From there, we can catch a ride to Wheatland or flag down a passing traveler." They rode double again, with Tallulah in front and Tucker behind her, his good arm wrapped securely around her waist. The rain continued throughout the morning, soaking them to the skin, but providing valuable cover as they navigated the increasingly muddy terrain. By midday, they had reached the stage road, a rutted dirt track that connected Wheatland to the larger settlement of Cheyenne. They took shelter beneath a rocky overhang to rest and dry out as best they could. "How's your shoulder?" Tallulah asked, noticing how Tucker held it stiffly. "I'll live," he replied, though the lines around his eyes spoke of pain he wouldn't acknowledge. Tallulah hesitated, then placed her hand gently on his arm. "Thank you, Tucker, for everything you've done for me. I haven't had much cause for gratitude lately, but meeting you, that's something I can be thankful for." Tucker covered her hand with his. "I made a promise to bring Reeves to justice, and I intend to keep it, but there's something you should know." "What is it?" she asked, sensing his seriousness. Tucker took a deep breath. "The territorial governor issued a warrant for Reeves's arrest last month, not for what he did to your family, but for land fraud and intimidation of settlers throughout the region. Sheriff Dawson was building a case against him even before the attack on your homestead." Tallulah stared at him in shock. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I didn't want to give you false hope," Tucker explained. "The governor's warrant doesn't prove Reeves was behind your parents' murder. We still need evidence for that." "But it means he could be arrested as soon as we reach Wheatland," Tallulah realized. "It means he won't get away with everything he's done." Tucker nodded. "Justice might come sooner than you thought." The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their conversation. Tucker immediately drew his revolver, positioning himself between Tallulah and the road. "Get behind me," he ordered quietly. But instead of Reeves and his men, a stagecoach appeared around the bend, its 4-horse team struggling through the muddy road. Tucker stepped out, waving his hat to flag it down. The driver pulled the team to a halt, eyeing them suspiciously from his perch. "What's your trouble, folks? We need passage to Wheatland," Tucker called up. "My friend's homestead was attacked by outlaws. We're bringing information to Sheriff Dawson." The driver squinted through the rain at Tallulah, then at Tucker's bandaged shoulder. "That's Stone, ain't it? The sheriff's tracker?" Tucker nodded. "It is." "Well, why didn't you say so?" The driver gestured to the coach door. "Climb aboard." "We're headed to Wheatland direct." Relief flooded through Tallulah as Tucker helped her into the coach. Inside, they found 2 other passengers, a middle-aged woman in a traveling dress and a young man who appeared to be a bank clerk, judging by his attire. "Goodness!" the woman exclaimed, taking in their bedraggled appearance. "What happened to you poor dears?" Tucker briefly explained their situation, omitting the details of Tallulah's parents' deaths out of consideration for her feelings. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Penelope Gardner, immediately offered them blankets from her travel bag. "My late husband was a doctor," she explained, examining Tucker's shoulder with practiced hands. "This bandaging is well done, but you'll need proper medical attention when we reach Wheatland." The stage-coach journey took the remainder of the day, the coach lurching and bouncing over the rough road. Tallulah found herself leaning against Tucker's good shoulder as exhaustion overtook her. He didn't seem to mind, his arm coming around her protectively when the coach hit particularly bad stretches of road. It was after sunset when they finally rolled into Wheatland, a growing settlement that served as a supply center for the surrounding ranches and homesteads. Tallulah had visited the town frequently with her father, but now it seemed different, almost alien without him by her side. Tucker helped her down from the coach, then led her directly to the sheriff's office, a solid building of pine logs with a sign declaring it the Office of the Law in bold letters. Sheriff Dawson was a barrel-chested man with a graying beard and shrewd eyes. He rose from behind his desk when they entered, his expression shifting from surprise to concern when he saw Tucker's condition. "Stone, what in tarnation happened to you?" His gaze moved to Tallulah. "And this must be Miss Thompson." "Jasper Reeves happened," Tucker said grimly. "He and his men tried to ambush us on our way here. They're still hunting Miss Thompson." The sheriff's expression darkened. "Sit down, both of you. I want to hear everything." For the next hour, Tallulah recounted the attack on her family's homestead, while Tucker detailed their encounters with Reeves and his men. Sheriff Dawson listened intently, occasionally making notes on a pad of paper. "We've been building a case against Reeves for months," he confirmed when they had finished. "The governor's warrant is just the beginning. With your testimony, Miss Thompson, we can add murder charges." "Will that be enough to bring him to justice?" Tallulah asked, doubt creeping into her voice. Sheriff Dawson leaned forward, his expression solemn. "Justice is never guaranteed, Miss Thompson, but I promise you this Jasper Reeves will not walk free while I'm sheriff. We'll put out wanted posters with his description first thing tomorrow. Every lawman in the territory will be looking for him." "And in the meantime," Tucker asked, "Miss Thompson needs safe lodging." "Mrs. Reynolds runs a respectable boarding house just down the street," Sheriff Dawson replied. "I'll arrange a room for Miss Thompson there. As for you, Stone, you need to see Doc Miller about that shoulder." Tallulah felt a sudden panic at the thought of being separated from Tucker. "I'd prefer if Mr. Stone stayed nearby," she said quickly, "for protection." Sheriff Dawson raised an eyebrow, glancing between them. "I can assign a deputy to watch the boarding house." "All due respect, Sheriff," Tucker said quietly, "but Reeves and his men know me. They'll be more cautious knowing I'm guarding Miss Thompson." The sheriff studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I'll arrange for adjoining rooms at the boarding house." "But this is a respectable town, Stone. I expect you to behave accordingly." Tucker's face flushed slightly. "Of course, Sheriff." Mrs. Reynolds' boarding house proved to be a tidy two-story building with lace curtains and polished floors. The landlady, a plump woman with kind eyes, showed them to their rooms on the second floor, tusking over their disheveled appearance. "Dinner's at 6, she informed them. "And there's hot water for bathing in the washroom at the end of the hall." Alone in her room, Tallulah sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the events of the past days. The room was simple but clean, with flowered wallpaper and a patchwork quilt on the bed. After the chaos and danger, the normality of it seemed almost surreal. A soft knock at the connecting door startled her. "Tallulah," Tucker's voice called softly. "Are you all right?" She crossed to the door and opened it. Tucker had removed his duster and hat, and a fresh bandage covered his shoulder, visible through his partially unbuttoned shirt. His hair was damp from washing, and he'd shaved the stubble that had covered his jaw during their journey. "Doc Miller patched me up," he explained, gesturing to his shoulder. "Said it should heal clean if I don't strain it." "That's good news," Tallulah said, suddenly conscious of her own bedraggled appearance. Tucker seemed to sense her discomfort. "I'll let you get settled, just wanted to check that you were comfortable." As he turned to go, Tallulah caught his hand. "Tucker, wait." He paused, looking down at their joined hands, then up at her face. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I close my eyes, I see my parents' homestead burning. I hear Reeves's voice. I'm afraid this will never end, that he'll find me here." Tucker's expression softened. He stepped closer, his free hand gently touching her cheek. "You're safe here, Tallulah. Sheriff Dawson has deputies watching the boarding house, and I'm right next door. Reeves won't get to you." "It's not just that," she continued, the words spilling out. I'm afraid of what happens after. If we do catch Reeves, if there is justice, what then? I have nothing left, no home, no family. That's not true, Tucker said softly. You have your land, you have your strength, and believe me, you are stronger than you know. Tallulah looked up into his blue eyes, finding a steadiness there that calmed her racing heart. Last night in the cave, you said broken things heal stronger. Do you really believe that? Tucker's thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. I do. I've seen it happen in others and in myself. I want to believe it, Tallulah whispered. I want to believe I can heal from this. You can, Tucker assured her. Not today, not tomorrow, but with time. He hesitated, then added, and you don't have to do it alone. The meaning behind his words hung in the air between them. Tallulah felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of hope kindling where before there had been only desolation. Thank you, she said simply, knowing the words were inadequate but unable to express the depth of her gratitude. Tucker smiled, that rare, transformative smile that changed his entire face. Get some rest, Tallulah. Tomorrow we begin building the case against Reeves. The next morning brought unexpected news. A rider arrived from the eastern edge of the county, reporting that Jasper Reeves and his men had been spotted heading toward the Montana Territory border. He's running, Sheriff Dawson announced when Tallulah and Tucker arrived at his office. News of the governor's warrant must have reached him. So what now? Tallulah asked, disappointment evident in her voice. He escapes justice? Not if I can help it, the sheriff replied grimly. I've telegraphed the federal marshal in Helena. They'll be watching for him. He turned to Tucker. I need you to lead a posse stone. Track Reeves before he crosses into Montana. Tucker glanced at Tallulah, hesitation clear in his expression. What about Miss Thompson? She won't be safe if I leave. I'll assign 2 deputies to guard her, Sheriff Dawson promised. The boarding house is secure and Mrs. Reynolds has a shotgun she's not afraid to use. Tucker still seemed uncertain. Reeves is dangerous, Sheriff. If he realizes we're closing in, he might double back to eliminate the one witness who can identify him. I can take care of myself, Tallulah interjected, though the thought of Tucker leaving filled her with dread. You should go, Tucker. This might be our only chance to capture Reeves. Tucker studied her face, his blue eyes troubled. Are you sure? Tallulah nodded, forcing confidence she didn't entirely feel. I'm sure. Bring him to justice, Tucker, for my parents and for all the others he's hurt. Preparations for the posse's departure were swift. 8 men, including Tucker, would ride north in pursuit of Reeves and his gang. Sheriff Dawson provided Tallulah with a small revolver to keep with her at all times and assigned deputies Miller and Hanson to guard the boarding house in shifts. Before mounting his horse, Tucker took Tallulah aside, his expression grave. I'll be back as soon as I can, he promised. Stay close to the deputies and don't leave the boarding house unless absolutely necessary. I will, Tallulah assured him. Be careful, Tucker. Reeves is desperate now. Tucker's hand found hers, squeezing gently. When this is over, we need to talk about the future, your future. Our future. Tallulah suggested softly, a smile touched Tucker's lips. I'd like that. He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a brief, gentle kiss to her forehead. Stay safe, Tallulah. She watched the posse ride out of town, Tucker's straight-backed figure leading the way. The days that followed were agonizing in their slowness. Tallulah divided her time between helping Mrs. Reynolds with chores at the boarding house and sitting with Sheriff Dawson as he took her formal statement about the attack on her family's homestead. The territorial prosecutor believes we have a strong case, the sheriff told her on the 3rd day. Even without physical evidence linking Reeves directly to the fire, the pattern of intimidation against your family and others is compelling. And if the posse catches him? Tallulah asked. He'll stand trial here in Wheatland, Sheriff Dawson confirmed. The governor has authorized a special court session. On the 5th day after Tucker's departure, a telegram arrived from the posse. Sheriff Dawson read it with a grim satisfaction. They've tracked Reeves to an abandoned mining camp near the border, he told Tallulah. Tucker believes they'll intercept them by tomorrow. That night, Tallulah lay awake in her room at the boarding house, listening to the occasional footsteps of Deputy Miller patrolling outside. The knowledge that Reeves might soon be captured should have brought relief, but instead she felt a growing unease. Her instincts proved correct shortly after midnight, when the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Tallulah was instantly alert, reaching for the revolver on her bedside table as shouts erupted from downstairs. A gunshot echoed through the house, followed by Mrs. Reynolds's terrified scream. Heart pounding, Tallulah moved to the connecting door, intending to barricade herself in Tucker's empty room, but before she could reach it, her own door burst open. Jasper Reeves stood in the doorway, his face twisted with malice. He was a tall man with a shock of white blonde hair and cold eyes that reminded Tallulah of a rattlesnake. "Miss Thompson," he drawled, a revolver held loosely in his hand. "I've been looking for you." Tallulah raised her own weapon, trying to keep her hand steady. "The deputy is currently bleeding out on Mrs. Reynolds's nice clean floor," Reeves finished for her. "Now put that gun down before you hurt yourself." "I know how to use it," Tallulah warned, cocking the hammer. Reeves sighed dramatically. "I'm sure you do. Your daddy probably taught you, same as he taught you to be stubborn about selling that worthless piece of land." His eyes narrowed. "But you should know, little lady, I never miss. So you can shoot me, but I'll get a shot off too, and then we'll both be dead. Is that what you want?" Tallulah's mind raced. If Deputy Miller was injured or dead and Deputy Hanson wasn't due until morning, her options were limited. "What do you want, Reeves?" she asked, playing for time. "What I've always wanted, your land," he replied. "Your signature on a deed transfer, and then you're free to go." "You murdered my parents," Tallulah said, rage rising within her. "And you expect me to just sign over their land?" Reeves shrugged. "I expect you to be practical. Your parents weren't, and look where it got them." "You admit it then," Tallulah pressed, her finger tightening on the trigger. "You ordered the attack on our homestead." Something shifted in Reeves's expression, a momentary flash of wariness. "I didn't say that, but it doesn't matter now, does it? The only witness to what happened that night is you, and soon you'll either be gone or dead, depending on your cooperation." A floorboard creaked in the hallway behind Reeves, but his attention was fixed on Tallulah. She fought to keep her expression neutral, not wanting to alert him to the approaching presence. "I'll never sign," she declared, raising her voice slightly to cover any sounds from the hallway. "And I'll never stop telling people what you did." Reeves's face darkened. "Then I guess we do this the hard way," his words cut off abruptly as the butt of a rifle crashed down on the back of his head. Reeves crumpled to the floor, revealing Tucker Stone standing in the doorway, his face grim and spattered with blood. "Tucker." Tallulah gasped, lowering her revolver with trembling hands. Tucker quickly secured Reeves's weapons, then used the man's own belt to bind his wrists behind his back. Only when Reeves was securely restrained did Tucker look up at Tallulah. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, crossing the room in 2 strides to examine her. Tallulah shook her head, then flung her arms around his neck, heedless of his injured shoulder. "I thought you were tracking Reeves near the Montana border." Tucker held her tightly against him. It was a false trail. One of his men broke under questioning and admitted Reeves had circled back to Wheatland. "I rode ahead of the posse to warn you. Deputy Miller is alive, but badly wounded," Tucker told her. "Mrs. Reynolds is tending to him while I came to find you." Tallulah sagged against him in relief, the adrenaline draining from her body. "It's over then, truly over." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "It's over. Reeves will stand trial for what he did to your parents and many others. He'll never threaten anyone again." In the days that followed, justice moved swiftly. Jasper Reeves and the 3 members of his gang who had been captured were held in the Wheatland jail while the territorial prosecutor built his case. 2 other gang members had been killed during the posse's pursuit, and the final member had escaped into Montana Territory, though the federal marshal there promised to continue the search. Deputy Miller survived his wounds, though he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. Mrs. Reynolds fussed over him like a mother hen, leading Sheriff Dawson to remark dryly that at least something good had come from the ordeal. The preliminary hearing was held a week after Reeves's capture. Tallulah testified about the months of intimidation her family had endured and about seeing Reeves near their property on the day of the fire. Other settlers came forward with similar stories of threats and violence, creating a damning picture of Reeves's activities throughout the region. Most damning of all was the testimony of one of Reeves's own men, who had agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. He confirmed that Reeves had ordered the attack on the Thompson homestead, though he claimed the fire had been an accident rather than intentional murder. The judge ordered Reeves held for trial, denying bail due to the severity of the charges and the risk of flight. As the courtroom emptied, Tucker found Tallulah waiting in the hallway. "You were magnificent in there," he told her, taking her hands in his. "Your parents would be proud." Tallulah smiled, though there was still sadness in her eyes. "I hope so. But I keep thinking about what comes next. The trial could take months, and even after it's over, I'm not sure I can go back to the homestead, not with those memories." Tucker led her outside into the bright sunshine of the town square. "I've been thinking about that. Your land is valuable, Tallulah, especially with the railroad coming through. You could sell it, use the money to start fresh somewhere else." "Where would I go?" she asked softly. Tucker's expression grew serious. "I have a small ranch about 10 miles east of town. It's not much, just 100 acres with a decent cabin and some good grazing land, but it's peaceful there, the kind of place where healing can happen." Tallulah looked up at him, understanding the invitation behind his words. "Tucker Stone, are you asking me to come live with you?" A flush crept up his neck. "Not exactly. Well, not yet." He cleared his throat. "What I'm trying to say rather badly is that I care for you, Tallulah. These past weeks, despite all the danger and grief, have shown me what kind of woman you are: brave, resilient, compassionate. And broken," she added quietly. Tucker shook his head. "Wounded, perhaps, but healing." His hands tightened around hers. "I'm not asking for promises now. It's too soon and you need time to grieve. But when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I want you to know that I'll be here." Tears welled in Tallulah's eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. "I don't know what the future holds, Tucker, but I do know that I don't want to face it without you." Tucker's smile was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. Gently, he drew her closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "May I?" he whispered. Tallulah nodded, her heart racing as his lips met hers in a tender kiss that held both promise and possibility. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his, feeling for the first time in weeks a sense of peace. "Remember what you told me that night in the cave," she murmured. "About broken things healing stronger," she nodded. "I think I'm beginning to understand what you meant." 3 months later, Jasper Reeves and his remaining men were convicted of multiple counts of intimidation, assault, and murder. The judge sentenced Reeves to hang, a sentence that was carried out 2 weeks later in the yard behind the Wheatland jail. Tallulah chose not to witness the execution. Instead, she spent the day at Tucker's ranch, now their ranch, planting a garden of wildflowers in memory of her parents. As she worked the soil, Tucker sat on the porch, whittling a new rocking chair to replace the one her father had made. That evening, they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Tucker's arm was around her shoulders, and Tallulah's head rested against him, their bodies fitting together as if designed for exactly this closeness. "I sold the homestead today," she told him quietly. "The railroad's lawyer came by with the papers and a bank draft." Tucker glanced down at her. "No regrets?" Tallulah considered the question. "Some sadness, but no regrets. My parents' dream was to build a life in this country. They did that, even if it was cut short." She placed her hand over Tucker's. "And now I'm building my own dream." "And what dream is that?" Tucker asked, his voice soft in the gathering dusk. Tallulah smiled up at him. "A life with someone who understands that broken doesn't mean ruined. Someone who's patient enough to wait while the cracks heal and strong enough to help when the healing hurts." Tucker leaned down to kiss her gently. "Sounds like a good dream to me." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Tallulah felt a sense of certainty settle over her. The pain of her parents' loss would never fully disappear, but it had changed, transformed into something she could carry without being crushed by its weight. And she wasn't carrying it alone. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the lonesome sound drifting across the prairie. But sitting there with Tucker, his arms solid and warm around her shoulders, Tallulah Thompson didn't feel alone at all. She was broken, yes, but she was healing stronger.